Hi, my presentation is about fetishes. There's 4 myths that are common about fetishes. The first one is that people with fetishes are dangerous, but in reality, fetishes were just relatively uncommon when being classified as a paraphilia. A paraphilia is more common in a voyeuristic environment, but because of the stigma associated with fetishes, most people do not discuss their fetish behavior. The second myth is that people with fetishes need their fetishes to have sex. Rees, who was one of the researchers in the study, found that people with fetishes often have intercourse, as it does not include the fetish object. Myth 3, people with fetishes don't want or need relationships. This was disproved in the research I'll discuss soon. Fetishism seems strange, so it must be sick, is the fourth myth. According to the DSM-2, in 1968, a sexual interest was a mental illness if the sex was bizarre. Any form of sexuality that was not considered normal was considered a mental disorder until 1994. Homosexuality was considered a mental illness till 1973. The article I chose for this assignment was titled An Investigation into the Solitary and Interpersonal Aspects of Sexual Object Fetishism, a Mixed Methods Approach, by Giselle Rees, Justin R. Garcia. This article was published in 2017 through Informa UK Limited in Sydney, Australia. The researchers tried to determine how much sexual object fetishism exists and whether it is primarily a solo or partnered act. Also, they were trying to determine that if there was an interpersonal aspect to fetishism and what was the importance of the partner in the fetish acts. Early beliefs about sexual fetishes were that they are a symbol of an individual. Therefore, it believed that the true fetishist became attached to the fetish object and no longer pursued sexual relationships with other partners, but would rather participate individually with the sexual object and give up all person-to-person sexual contact. Rees and Garcia believe that this is incorrect, as many people with a sexual fetish have been proven to be in intimate relationships. These researchers also look deeper into the erotic location error theory, which states that the fetish and the partner are competing for the sexual focus. And the individual will make an error and pays attention to the object, which would be the fetish, associated with the person, like the high-heeled shoes the person is wearing, instead of the person themselves. Rees and Garcia conducted 2 studies in which they had people participate in online surveys. The first study included 57 participants who were a convenience sample, and they were included if they were identified as having a sexual fetish, which include glove, boot, dress, and panties, and if they just did the survey. They were not included if they identified as participating in transvestic fetishes. The participants were aged 18 to 70, and most Caucasian were heterosexual and male. The results from Study 1 were used to formulate a hypothesis for Study 2. The 2 questions they asked participants in the first study were, is anyone else involved when you engage in a sexual activity? If so, who? And secondly, do you have a preference for who's wearing the fetish item? And if so, who? The results to the first question were that 56% had participated with a partner in a fetish activity, and 51% had been involved with a romantic partner. The results show that the participants had involved someone else in their fetish activity. The results for question 2 showed that 67% preferred the fetish clothing item to be worn by another person. The results show that the sexual object fetishism was preferentially an interpersonal sexual behavior. For those who preferred to participate in the activity with a romantic partner was 21%, and 79% stated that the females were the ones to wear the fetish item. This study had limitations, though. The participants were only provided the options male or female to the answers of gender, and it was a small sample size, 57. Due to the open-ended questions, some responses were coded as unclear. In Study 2, the researchers tried to solve some of those problems by asking closed-ended questions and involved a larger sample, 195 people, and included more options for sex and gender. In Study 2, the researchers were able to formulate 2 hypotheses based on the answers from the first study. Hypothesis 1 stated that people who involved themselves with sexual activities would have done so both individually and interpersonally. Hypothesis 2 was that individuals with a sexual fetish would rate the partnered fetish activities as more gratifying than solitary activities. The researchers looked at their findings to see whether solitary or partnered activities occurred more often. It was also a convenient sample through internet surveys, except this time they included the Kinsey Institute's Facebook and Twitter pages. There were 195 participants, 18 to 69 years old, mostly Caucasian, heterosexual, and cisgender male. Cisgender means that you're the gender you were assigned at birth. If the doctor says when you were born you're a boy and you agree you are a boy, then you'd be a cisgender male. Cisgender is basically the opposite to transvestism. They reported object fetishes including clothing, socks, jeans, glasses, and panties, and non-clothing, trains and balloons. I'm not sure how trains would work with a fetish. And they asked the following questions. Have you ever engaged in a fetish sexual activity alone? Have you engaged in fetish activities that involved another person? And how satisfying are the fetish activities that are engaged in alone? Or if with someone else, how satisfying are those activities? Hypothesis 1 was affirmed by the results of the study, showing that out of 195 participants, 173 participated in solitary fetishism. And hypothesis 2 was affirmed with the participants rating partnered fetish sexual activities as more satisfying than solitary activities. Reflecting the same participant values as study 1, there were few female participants as well. Which showed males were more likely to participate in fetish activities. This was a micro-level analysis based on the symbolic interaction theory, and it was a strong article because there is the sense of anonymity through the use of online surveys. And I agree with the outcome of the research. The topic of sexual fetishes is one that's usually taboo. So in order to get the most valid and reliable responses, anonymity would be the best option. I think society is slowly becoming more accepting of people as they are. The views people have about others who practice sexual acts are deemed outside the box of normality, are no longer those of deviance or a mental illness. Through research like the surveys discussed in the paper I chose, a broader, more open-minded approach can be had by the public by being informed. Different cultures all over the world have different behaviors and views regarding sex. So for us to decide what's normal and abnormal is just unfair. And as long as the sexual behavior is not hurting anybody, I don't think there's any reason for it to be deemed unhealthy. Thank you.